Good evening and welcome to your special Voice of the Voter election results coverage tonight. I'm Brian Nakona with Amanda Hill and Phil Hirschkorn to talk about the results that we anticipate coming down tonight on the ranked choice voting election, which we've been following for several days at this point.
Yeah, this is around the time we signed off on June 9th, election night, knowing only the first round results in the two governor's races and the CD2 Democratic primary.
That is a very good point. And we just got an update, about 10 minutes ago, Phil? What did she say?
Well, the thing is, we're not just waiting for those three big races, two statewide and one half the state. There's a couple legislative races. I don't even know which ones, but they're also in a ranked choice runoff situation. So they've decided to do all five. And I think the delay right now is because we were told a few minutes ago because of those legislative races, if I understood the Chief Deputy Secretary of State correctly.
And what's interesting about that is you actually did the math on this because they started one of those races and it took about 40 minutes to do their proofing process, which is what it's called. So for her to come out 10 minutes ago and say, okay, we're starting the second one, we can deduce maybe another 40 minutes there, or from here another 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, you guys know in the newsroom I made a patience playlist
Appreciate it.
earlier in the night to keep us awake. We had Patience from Guns N' Roses. We had The Waiting is the Hardest Part from Tom Petty.
Which has been stuck in my head all night now.
We got to keep our adrenaline going. But, in fairness, it's been 9 days since election night. They've only worked 7 days. They didn't work through last weekend. I don't know why, but they didn't. Tomorrow's a state and federal holiday, Juneteenth, so they really want to get it done tonight. There have been questions. We don't know the answers to the costs of ranked choice voting runoffs. I mean, obviously, they're mostly staff people who are paid their salary to do these elections, but undoubtedly there'll be some overtime costs. I think we learned in the 2018 ranked choice runoff, the first one that we had in the Jared Golden race, there was something like $400,000 plus in additional costs, if I remember correctly. Our Christian Hart is in Augusta. He has some more information on that when we get to him. But that's one of the many complaints about ranked choice voting.
What it takes to do this.
As
the way we do our elections now, at least our primaries.
That's right.
It doesn't get carried over into the general election. And this whole process has been transparent from the perspective of the Secretary of State's office. They've had a YouTube stream up that we've had a link to available for you. We've had a reporter there every day tracking it, reporting it as well.
And anyone from the public is welcome to go there and watch the process.
They made that as public as possible, I think, for people to be part of it.
Like watching paint dry, unfortunately.
Well, and a number of people commented on that. A former painter was in the room earlier this weekend.
I didn't know that.
And we interviewed him, and he said, I have made a career out of watching paint dry, so this is right up my alley. So, no one's been fooled by the fact that this is a slow, methodical process.
We should might way to explain why. I mean, there are 487 municipalities in the state of Maine. All of them have either thumb drives, which were attached to the optical scanners. So everyone in Maine votes by paper, right? And so you're either in like Portland and Bangor and larger places, you have the optical scanner that counts the votes, so you get a thumb drive. And in the smaller towns, they still count them by hand. So it's either thumb drives or ballots. But the catch is, the law says only law enforcement can transport those materials to Augusta. We're a pretty large state, right?
A lot of mileage to put
A lot of mileage, 487 places converging on Augusta. So that's the logistics of doing this. They started the uploading, I think, earlier than we expected, which was last Friday. But here we are a little later than they had hoped, which was Wednesday. I think it's now Thursday. This is sort of the last day that they thought they would be doing this, and they are, and it's almost midnight.
And there were a handful of cases that they told us about just through this week that they had to go back to towns, make another trip to a town to pick up either the physical ballots because there was an issue with that thumb drive that Phil was just explaining, or the wrong thumb drive was delivered and they had to go back to the town to get it. So that's been all part of the process. Good.
I was just going to say, we do have Christian ready to go, but before we do, let's kind of recap these races here. We've got CD2, which at last check on Tuesday, it was Joe Baldacci who was leading that. Who knows, out of the ranked choice voting, what's going to happen. So we have Matthew Dunlap, Jordan Wood, and Paige Loud actually conceded shortly after Tuesday. And then we have in the governor race.
Well, let's just take just on the minute, Amanda. So Joe Baldacci, what they're looking at, what we're showing you is a snapshot of those first round votes. This is the tally as it stood on June 9th, and the days afterward as the first round votes came in. State Senator Joe Baldacci of Bangor in first place, not by a lot. Matthew Dunlap behind him, the state auditor, former Secretary of State, former state legislator, about 2,000 votes behind him. But he's only, this is very interesting, he's only 293 votes ahead of former congressional staffer Jordan Wood. And Paige Loud, as you mentioned, she's out. So the first thing that's going to happen is her second choice votes will be allocated, 7,874 of them, well, if they're all filled out, but potentially that many. And, you know, Jordan Wood's hope is that he gets more of them, say 300 or more of them than Matt Dunlap, and then he would leapfrog Matt Dunlap and be in the final round against Joe Baldacci, who, as I said, is only 1,800 votes of Matt Dunlap. That's the hope. Everyone I've talked to, at least in the Democratic campaigns, sees a path in this race and the other one we'll talk about, the governor's race, sees a potential path to victory.
And that is the million-dollar question I think we've been talking about since last Tuesday, is those who chose to do ranked choice when they voted, who was their second choice person? Because that will really determine where things
and there's a real cultural difference here. Democrats have embraced ranked choice voting. Republicans tend to reject it more than the Democrats do. So we expect a much higher frequency of ranked choice votes to be in the pool, if you will, when they run the Democratic numbers. You've got 215,000 votes in the first round. I think, you know, I'm just going to guess here, 90% could have second choice votes. A high percentage, I think, is what we expect. In the Republican race, which we'll talk about later, but, you know, fewer of those. So anyway, do you want to talk about the Republican race where it stands before we go to Christian?
Let's talk about the governor race. Go ahead and start with the Republicans,
Well, sure. So Bobby Charles, who has never served in Maine government, but has served in Washington in a variety of posts. He's 65. He was an assistant secretary of state. He worked in both the Reagan White House, that was as an intern, and later the Bush White House. That's the first President Bush. He was a naval intelligence officer, has a strong Washington resume, but none in Augusta. And that's a point of bragging rights. It was for 6 of the 7 Republican candidates.